What's the craziest government or military experiment that is actually true? Story 1. Project X-Ray, the Bat Bombs. During World War II, as the Allies searched for unconventional ways to cripple Japan, one of the strangest ideas ever conceived by the US military took flight literally. The plan was simple in theory: capture thousands of bats, attach miniature incendiary bombs to them, and release them over Japanese cities. The bats would roost under the eaves of wooden homes and ignite entire neighborhoods when their tiny time charges detonated. In the desert of New Mexico, engineers built a mock Japanese village to test the concept. The bats were loaded with miniature napalm charges and released from aircrafts, but instead of heading toward the test site, the first wave of bats scattered and roosted in a real nearby town. Moments later, fires erupted across the area. The test had been too successful. Too fast, the village burned to the ground. The project was quickly abandoned, not because of the accident, but because the atomic bomb ended the war before the bat bomb ever saw combat. Still, it remains one of the most surreal weapons programs ever seriously considered by the US military. Story 2. The Ghosts of Bikini Atoll. Between 1946 and 1958, the United States conducted 23 nuclear tests on the remote coral islands of Bikini Atoll. When the first thermonuclear bomb was detonated, residents were not evacuated for 3 days. Radiation spread silently across the lagoon. Generations later, the descendants of those islanders live on a bay, a single square mile of land with nearly 10,000 people. It is no paradise. The island is little more than coral rock. Cuts easily fester, and infections from the ground. Coral often lead to amputation. Waterborne disease is common, and the diet made up mostly of US food aid is dominated by canned meat, processed sugar, and spam. The irony is painful. Their natural food sources, fish and coconuts, were poisoned by radioactive cesium. Even today, though the levels are safer, most residents refuse to eat them. The fear of contamination has become cultural memory. A bay is sometimes called the slum of the Pacific, but it's more than that. It's the living aftermath of a nuclear experiment that never truly ended. Story 3. The Woman Who Lived with a Dolphin. In 1965, neuroscientist John C. Lilly launched one of the strangest experiments in modern science. He wanted to teach dolphins to speak human language. To do it, he flooded a house in the Virgin Islands and placed a young woman researcher, Margaret Howe, inside to live full-time with a male dolphin named Peter. For 10 weeks, Margaret ate, slept, and worked alongside Peter in waist-deep water, trying to teach him to mimic words. At first, it seemed like an experiment in communication, but as the days passed, Peter's interest shifted. He became infatuated and increasingly aggressive when his advances were rejected. Margaret tried to redirect his behavior, even arranging visits with female dolphins to calm him down, but the line between science and surrealism had already blurred. The project soon fell apart, criticized as unethical and bizarre. Yet decades later, it remains a haunting story of human ambition and of how easily the boundary between empathy and obsession can dissolve in the name of science. Story 4. Operation Sea Spray in the era of open-air experiments. In the early years of the Cold War, the US military waged a secret campaign not against enemies abroad, but against its own cities. Beginning in 1950, the Navy sprayed clouds of supposedly harmless bacteria over San Francisco to test how a biological attack might spread in an urban area. Soon after, residents began falling ill with pneumonia-like symptoms. The tests expanded. From 1951 to 1969, the Department of Defense conducted open-air experiments across North America, releasing bacterial agents, viruses, and chemical tracers over cities like St. Louis, Minneapolis, and New York. Zinc cadmium sulfide, a known carcinogen, was sprayed over unsuspecting neighborhoods. Tens of thousands of civilians were exposed without consent, all in the name of defense research. Only decades later, when the documents were declassified, did the scale of these experiments become known. The results remain murky, but the moral cost was unmistakable. Story 5. The Nixon Hit That Never Happened. In the shadows of the Nixon White House, paranoia ran deep. Investigative journalists were exposing corruption at the highest levels, and some officials wanted revenge. According to court testimony, one senior aide ordered operatives to meet with the CIA to devise ways to neutralize the troublesome reporter. They considered coating his steering wheel with poison, tampering with his medicine, even staging a fatal mugging. Before any plan could be carried out, the Watergate burglary exploded into scandal. The operatives were arrested, and the plot was buried with them. Years later, one of those men once caught in the heart of the scheme became a born-again Christian and prison reform advocate. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom and praised by future politicians for his message of faith and hope. History is full of redemption stories, but few are quite this strange. A man once linked to an assassination plot celebrated as a national hero. Story 6. Field Test. During the height of the Cold War, secrecy and science often collided in ways that blurred the line between research and recklessness. In the 1950s and 60s, American intelligence agencies reportedly released chemical tracers and biological agents over U.S. cities to test how they might spread in the event of an attack. The chosen substances were said to be harmless, but many were not. Residents in places like Chicago and St. Louis later recalled mysterious illnesses that matched the very symptoms these tests were designed to track. At the same time, soldiers were ordered to stand on desert test ranges as atomic weapons detonated on the horizon. Cameras rolled as the blast waves hit, recording exactly what radiation and shock would do to the human body. Most of those men didn't survive long enough to see the footage declassified. And perhaps most disturbing of all, in the tense days of the Cuban Missile Crisis, U.S., officials quietly discussed fabricating a Soviet attack to justify going to war. To this day, we were left wondering which experiments ever truly ended and which simply became classified under new names. Story 7. The Philadelphia Experiment. It is one of the most persistent legends to come out of World War II. A Navy destroyer that vanished literally. According to the story, the USS Eldridge was part of an experiment to make ships invisible to radar using powerful electromagnetic fields. When the generators activated, the ship reportedly disappeared in a flash of blue-green light and reappeared moments later, miles away. Crew members, the legend says, were embedded in the steel bulkheads fused with the metal itself. Others went mad, claiming they could walk through walls or vanish at will. The Navy denies the experiment ever happened, dismissing it as a misinterpretation of routine radar testing research. But over the decades, witnesses and declassified documents have kept the story alive. Maybe the Eldridge never vanished, or maybe it did, and what came back wasn't quite the same. Story 8. The lights over the valley, Afghanistan, early 2000s, a clear night over the mountains. An infantry unit on post watched as 7 bright lights suddenly appeared in the sky, as luminous as flares, but silent, unmoving, and far too high to be man-made. They hung there for half an hour, bathing the valley in daylight, before drifting in slow, synchronized arcs and then vanishing all at once. Every radio channel erupted. Commanders, scouts, airmen, everyone was watching the same phenomenon, and nobody could explain it. They weren't flares, they weren't aircraft, and there were no scheduled operations in that area. For months afterwards, soldiers whispered about that night, replaying the silence between those lights. In war, you expect danger from below, not from above. Story 9. Invisible Machines. For decades, the US military has hidden entire technologies in plain sight. When the SR-71 Blackbird was first unveiled, it looked like a science fiction, a jet that could outrun missiles and touch the edge of space. But it had already been flying for years. The B-2 stealth bomber was the same, invisible to radar, unseen by the public until long after it was operational. Today, military insiders say there are still aircraft we don't know about, systems that bend light, cancel sound, or communicate in quantum encryption. Behind every generation of known weapons, there is another still locked behind steel doors in Nevada or Alaska. The next breakthrough might not be faster or stronger, it might simply be unseen. Story 10. Beyond the Bomb. Since the dawn of the atomic age, nations have lived under a single terrifying truth: whoever controls the biggest weapon controls the world. But now that nearly every major power possesses nuclear arms, the balance of fear has evened out. The next frontier is already being discussed in theoretical labs: antimatter weapons. Antimatter, the mirror opposite of matter, annihilates anything it touches, releasing pure energy. Scientists can already create it in microscopic quantities inside particle accelerators. The problem is containment. Even a trace of antimatter will destroy its container the instant it contacts normal atoms. Still, the research continues. Meanwhile, governments have also begun planning how to survive the after effects of nuclear war. Entire programs devoted to running society under radioactive skies. And perhaps the most chilling idea of all, that the darkest experiments today aren't conducted by governments anymore but by corporations, hidden behind patents and private funding. Story 11. The Invisible Hand. Most people think their phones belong to them. Their photos, their messages, their search is private. But privacy was the first casualty of the digital age. Governments no longer need to break into your house to see what you're hiding. They just ask the companies that already have it. Every like, click, and conversation is stored, sold, and sifted through by algorithms that understand you better than you understand yourself. And while you scroll, laugh, and argue online, movements rise and fall, some organic, others carefully manufactured. Each wave of outrage and compassion nudges society in the direction someone, somewhere, wanted it to go. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, pharmaceutical giants test new compounds on volunteers who never signed up. The results scrubbed, rewritten, and repackaged into billion-dollar treatments. We think we are free because we can still complain. But in a world where outrage is the most profitable emotion, even rebellion can be engineered. Story 12. The Experiment we all joined. Right now, the greatest psychological experiment in history is happening in plain sight. Governments and corporations are studying how people think in groups, how isolation, fear, and belonging can bend entire populations toward predictable behaviors. Online communities become echo chambers, beliefs harden. The more certain people feel, the easier they are to control. Every hashtag, every viral post, every outrage cycle is part of the data. They were learning how to infiltrate and steer movements, not through force, but through familiarity. A voice that sounds like yours, a meme that fits your worldview, a cause that feels like your own idea. It does not mind control it as mind guidance. The best kind is the one you never notice. Story 13. The Sky Switch. When scientists realized the planet was heating beyond repair, they started designing a last resort, a way to cool Earth by force. The idea was simple: launch reflective particles into the upper atmosphere to block sunlight, a planetary sunshade, geoengineering. In theory, it could save humanity. In practice, it could destroy it faster than climate change ever could. One wrong calculation and the global weather system could unravel, crops dying, oceans shifting, entire regions freezing while others burn. Still, somewhere in a high-security lab, the technology exists. Rockets have already been tested. It is a doomsday lever, a single button that could decide whether humanity cooks or chokes. And someday, when the world grows desperate enough, someone will press it. Story 14. The algorithm of influence democracy was built on conversation, on persuasion, through reason. Now persuasion has been replaced by precision. Every political movement, every election, every global argument now runs through invisible digital networks. Data harvested from billions of people forms psychological profiles detailed enough to predict not only what you will believe, but when. It doesn't take much to shift public opinion, just a few well-timed posts, a few synthetic voices, a few stories designed to inflame. The result is chaos that feels spontaneous, but isn't tea. It's engineered ambivalence where truth matters less than engagement. Some experts call it the death of democracy. Others call it a test to see how far the illusion of choice can stretch before it breaks. Story 15. Digital battlefields. Wars no longer need soldiers, just screens. Every major power has online units, unseen armies of trolls, bots, and psychological operatives. They don't destroy cities, they destroy trust. Their job isn't to conquer territory, but to keep populations divided, furious, and exhausted. Russia's teams flood social feeds with false stories. China shapes narratives through subtle censorship. Iran, Israel, and the US all do it too, whispering through memes and comments, turning citizens against each other in invisible wars fought through Wi-Fi. It's called cyber-psychological warfare, and it's not about winning. It's about keeping everyone too distracted to notice who is actually in control. The most effective propaganda doesn't tell you what to think, it just makes you certain that everyone else is wrong. Story 16. The day Hawaii died quietly, January 13th, 2018. A calm morning in Hawaii shattered by a single message. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. This is not a drill. For 38 minutes, people ran, hid, cried, and prayed. Families lowered their children into storm drains. Tourists called loved ones for what they thought were their final goodbyes. Then, false alarm. Officially, it was human error, a training mistake, but some believe it was a psychological test, a live experiment in mass panic. How do people behave when they think they were minutes from death? What happens to cell networks, emergency systems, social order? Or maybe it wasn't an accident at all. Maybe something was detected and quietly intercepted. Whatever really happened, the strangest part wasn't the message. It was how fast the world forgot. Story 17. The quiet country. In some nations, injustice brings people to the streets. In others, it brings silence. In Ireland, a housing crisis has turned thousands into the new homeless entire families, living in cars, hotels, or worse. Rents have exploded while landlords and politicians profit together in plain sight. Police now assist with forced evictions. Private security teams tear people from their homes. A proposed law would even make it illegal to film the police while they do it. And yet the streets remain calm. No mass protests, no fire, just quiet compliance. Some say the population has been conditioned into docility, pacified by screens, exhausted by struggle, distracted by comfort. The same pattern seen across the world, rage replaced by resignation. A population that doesn't riot is easier to rule. Story 18. The calm machine. There's a theory that modern technology wasn't built to empower us but to sedate us. Social media keeps us addicted to outrage, news cycles keep us divided, and entertainment algorithms lull us into thinking everything's fine. Behind the noise, Global systems hum quietly, stabilizing or collapsing governments, spreading disinformation, shaping public emotion. Nanotechnology now exists that can enter the bloodstream unnoticed. With it, anyone can be silenced in ways that look like natural causes. It's not about controlling what you do, it's about controlling what you believe. And as long as you think you're free, the machine works perfectly. Story 19. The wires that listen. Every wall socket in your home hums with electricity and possibly something more. Decades ago, engineers discovered how to send digital data through power lines. The idea was simple: internet through electricity. But when one inventor tried to patent a large-scale communication network using this method, the NSA sent a cease and desist order. The reason? Power line data can do more than transmit information. It can collect it. Every device you plug in could, theoretically, be used as a listening post, part of a silent grid that doesn't need Wi-Fi to hear you. Electricity isn't just powering your life, it might be watching it. Story 20. The sleep room. A woman is paid $12,000 to live alone for 28 days. No clocks, no windows, no sense of time. She's allowed to talk to researchers, but never anyone outside. It is called a sleep study. Officially, it is to understand circadian rhythms. But what they were really testing remains unclear. Why does the government fund so many sleep isolation experiments? Why are the subjects monitored constantly with EEGs, cameras, and biometric sensors? Some say it's a part of a classified neuroscience project studying how the mind breaks without sunlight, sound, or time. Because in the dark, when the brain begins to dream without control, that is when it reveals its deepest programming. Story 21. The war on curiosity. Have you noticed how hard it's becoming to simply read the news? Endless pop-ups, autoplay videos, ad blocker warnings, every step between you and real information now feels like resistance training for your attention span. Some believe this isn't an accident, that the flood of ads that disable your blocker walls and the slow death of print journalism are all part of a larger system designed to discourage reading itself. When information feels exhausting to access, most people settle for headlines or memes. Independent journalism withers, replaced by viral outrage, and what is left is a population that no longer reads deeply, only reacts. It is not censorship by deletion, it is censorship by distraction. Story 22. The choice. I once dreamt of standing in a school auditorium while the government offered us two options: life or voluntary euthanasia, part of a new national effort to stabilize population levels. Half the room stepped forward without hesitation. The rest of us watched them walk calmly toward their deaths. It was just a dream, but as the world strains under climate change, collapsing ecosystems, and dwindling resources, the question lingers: what happens when governments decide there are simply too many people? Population control doesn't have to mean violence. It can happen quietly through propaganda, social engineering, and shaping which lifestyles are seen as responsible. Maybe the real experiment isn't he who chooses death, but who still chooses life. Story 23. The Obedience Code. Some say the world's greatest experiment isn't technological, it's psychological. We are born into a system that teaches us to trade time for money, money for comfort, and comfort for compliance. Prices rise, wages stagnate, and every screen tells us what to want next. Fluoride dulls the mind, media distorts reality. Schools teach obedience more than curiosity, or so the theory goes. The world becomes a self-running machine, people working just hard enough to stay tired, entertained, and dependent. And the strangest part, even when we see it, we shrug. If control feels normal, is it still control or just life as we know it? Story 24. The White Pill. First week of Army basic training. You line up shoulder to shoulder and they start handing out pills, dozens of them, no labels, no explanations. You swallow whatever you're given. One pill stood out a small white tablet you were told to take immediately. Then wash your hands. You ask what it was. No one knows. Some say they never got it. Others can't remember at all. Maybe it was harmless. Maybe it wasn't tea. The military has a long history of human testing, from radiation, exposure to psychotropic trials. New recruits make perfect subjects, young, obedient, and eager to serve. Whatever that pill was, it went down easily, and no one ever asked again. Story 25, the shadow prototype. Every new technology you see, drones, touch screens, AI, even GPS, likely existed decades earlier in classified labs. According to insiders, the military's real technology is always at least 20 years ahead. Exoskeletons that triple human strength, lasers that melt metal from miles away, fabric that bends light. We re-shown fragments, the safe versions, while the real breakthroughs stay hidden behind black budgets. Because for every gadget that hits the market, there's a prototype that is never supposed to. Civilian tech is just the echo. The future is already built. It is just waiting for permission to exist. Story 26, the smoke curtain. Some believe the US government has mastered an ancient art, distraction. The theory goes that modern propaganda isn't about lying outright. It is about flooding your vision with noise. By making you focus on flashy conflicts like Syria or Crimea, the devastation in places like Libya and Yemen fades quietly into the background. They say history itself is now an experiment. Rewrite it, trim the edges, change the emphasis, and entire generations grow up believing the edited version. When you shape the past, you don't just control what people remember. You control what they believe. Story 27, the chemical whisper. What if the technology we see is only the tip of a much larger machine? Some think governments and corporations already possess advanced AI not confined to screens, but integrated into society itself, quietly observing. Others believe experiments with chemical influence continue subtle additives in food or water, engineered not to harm, but to nudge. A little less energy here, a little more compliance there. But the real field of study isn't chemistry, it's anthropology, tracking how ideas spread, who influences whom, and how digital crowds shift as one mind. In this theory, every viral trend, every outrage cycle is a test, and we all test subjects. Story 28, the invisible subjects. Few people talk about it, but in the shadows of the healthcare system lies a quiet scandal. Children in state care being used as unofficial test cases for psychiatric medication. These kids, already in unstable circumstances, are labeled emotionally disturbed and prescribed combinations of antidepressants, antipsychotics, and stimulants drugs most adults wouldn't be given together. There's no family to question it, no advocate to intervene. The state covers the cost. The pharmaceutical data rolls in. They call it treatment, but to some it looks a lot like testing on those least able to refuse. Story 29, the perfect patient. A former public servant once said, human experimentation never really ended. It just became more polite. Hospitals, rehab centers, and mental health facilities operate with good intentions, but behind closed doors, doctors make sweeping decisions for patients who can legally consent. Medications are changed, doses adjusted, therapies trialed, all in the name of care. Many of these patients are wards of the state people without guardians or families to protect them. To the system, they are ideal candidates, stable environments, controlled conditions, and no one asking questions. It's not a secret lab. It is a core facility, and what makes it so effective. Story 30, the great dumb down. There is a theory that ignorance itself is the ultimate form of control. Over decades, public education has been defunded, critical thinking removed, and genuine curiosity replaced with standardized obedience. Entertainment fills the gaps where knowledge used to live. A population that reads less, questions less, and fears more is easier to manage, easier to divide. They say it isn't a coincidence, it is a long game, because the smartest way to control a society is to convince it there is nothing left worth learning. Story 31, some of the technology the military, CIA, etc. keep from the public is pretty incredible. I remember reading about how smartphone plus touch screen technology was actually invented around 1990 for military purposes, but it took until like 2007 for there to be an actual smartphone on the market. I would be very amused, of course, but not that surprised if the US military or CIA, etc. are currently developing or have already developed a functioning invisibility cloak, semi-sentient AI robots or programs, flying cars, or car-sized personal planes for use by soldiers in battle or transportation, etc. Of course, these sound pretty ridiculous, but you never know. Story 32. You know those really agile robots built by Boston Dynamics? I guarantee you that there are dozens of those robots hidden in military research hangars with heavy machine guns and rocket launchers attached to them. They are probably also learning wolfpack tactics, cooperating to eliminate human enemies as efficiently as possible. Eventually, most humans in the workforce will be redundant and replaced by robots. This will lead to mass protests and riots. In the past, this has created social change since you can't slaughter civilians en masse because they are needed to complete menial tasks such as washing dishes for the wealthy elite. And even if you did want to end them all, it would be difficult to get human soldiers willing to do so, in the developed world at least. The robots solve both these problems. The rioting masses are no longer needed for their labor due to robots, and the robots are perfectly willing and able to slaughter them all. Story 33. Testing viruses and cures that will be used to eliminate 90% of the population, while leaving the elite and necessary humans alive. As automation keeps making jobs less and less available, there's this fantasy that somehow universal basic income is going to be a thing. It's not. In what world will those with positions of power shell out ungodly amounts of money to essentially keep a bunch of humans as pets? It's not going to happen. At some point, humans are going to become an unsustainable species, and you can be damn sure our government and others are working on ways to fix that. The first country that does this becomes an enormous resource with insufficient military to defend it. Bad plan. If such a conspiracy were to work, it would require a fully coordinated pandemic across all countries to maintain parity. That would result in many unintended consequences due to the gigantic sample size that is, whole world. And it would be an impossible secret to maintain due to the scope, again, whole world. Story 34, super advanced cluster computing techniques, as in the ability to instantly convert all US-based internet assets to its use at a click of a mouse and shut out everyone if needed. If it's a computer connected to the internet, its contents and computing capabilities become part of the military's cluster supercomputer. All communication abilities of every device becomes military communication, so any soldier can pick up anyone's phone, bypass the login, and use the device for military communication. Or just use them for surveillance and tracking. Feed one phone a code and every computer and smart device in the country begins collaborating on decoding it. A target was just spotted by an IP camera in New York. Every single soldier, Fed, and CIA spook in the country is able to track his face and movement through the city. Even the bored soldier in San Diego can watch SEAL Team 6 linebacker The Fool to the ground in a back alley in real time. Every single IP device becomes the government's own personal closed-circuit network capable of anything and everything computers do. Do I have any real reason to think that? No. Would anyone put that past the military? No. Would it surprise anybody? No. Can anyone really say that it's completely impossible? Nope. I've seen crazy crap in my time as an IT guy. Story 35. I believe that the government is trying to make programmable zombies, reanimated dead bodies, or living ones, whose motor functions are under remote control. I also believe that certain diseases are being created or modified by government agencies to be used as possible biological weapons. There are theories that government agencies are trying to use weather control devices to use the very weather as a weapon. There are theories that devices are being created to cause earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. There is a secret government base on the dark side of the moon. There are countless underground bases where scientists work with aliens to develop new technologies. Every phone call, email, text message, and every social media upload and update are all being recorded. The internet is under constant surveillance as well. There are super advanced technologies that are decades ahead of what they say is available, but have not been released to the public. The Alexa and other devices like it are used to monitor anyone that has them. There are cures for cancer and AIDS that have not been released because the government believes in population control.